opinion is that our government is run and operated by sociopaths, psychopaths, and megalomaniacs, very difficult word for me to say, megalomaniacs, hell-bent on instilling fear and installing themselves as the autocracy of the world, starting with the United States. You may not agree with all of that, and that's okay, but you can certainly agree with the actions that are being taken in the name of our government against our people and peaceful, law-abiding immigrants to this country. There is, fortunately, an irresistible number of us who disagree with their goal. We are fighting back peacefully, which I totally advocate. One thing I'd like to mention and encourage all of you watching now is that we need to advocate for all 50 states to align behind Georgia to object to and sue the federal government in as many ways as possible for violating state sovereignty by stealing ballots from the 2020 election from Fulton County in Georgia. They have no right to have any access to that documentation and information, and we know a lot of improprieties have already occurred, certainly after the 2020 election initially and subsequently. All the false narratives and false claims about the stolen elections. I think there's probably a greater chance that the 2024 election was stolen. Who was in the best position to do that? I don't know, maybe was it Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, who purchased the American elections with his great power and influence, and then was able to get inside the government with unfettered free access to all of our records and institutions, and actually affected a lot of shutdown of agencies, which, you know, are all powers of Congress, never entitled to an individual citizen with no authorization. The only person that thought that might be a good idea, I guess, was Donald Trump, and then anybody in his cabinet who, you know, are bowing to his the orange tin pot dictator's requests and commands about what they should do. Anyway, please call your representatives, and primarily your senators, insist that they vote no on what I call the Save Republicans from Fair Elections Act. I think if that's what you call it, they will understand exactly what you're talking about. The Republicans call it in Orwellian newspeak style the Save America Act, or more formally, Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. Oh my God, that is so horribly fake and wrong. But I call it, and I repeat, the Save Republicans from Fair Elections Act. Call your senators, let them know to vote no on this heinous and horrific rejection of free elections and access to the polling places, and encouragement of everyone eligible in our country to vote. Voting is the backbone of our country. It's the only way that people have access to power to express, for us to express what we truly feel. And everybody, every American citizen is entitled to the power of the vote. And their votes should be equal. Mine, yours, theirs, all equal. Not unequal like, you know, Citizens United has made us, giving horrifically poorly adjudicated ruling from the Supreme Court of the United States back in 2010. Yeah, they falsely named you Citizens United. It wasn't citizens. It was some right-wing nutcases who brought that suit, and the right-wing justices of the Supreme Court who enacted that. And ever since then, for the last 16 years, nobody in our legislature blame Democrats along with the Republicans, although the Republicans get a little more blame from my perspective because of their affiliation and alliance with these right-wing perspectives that deprive American citizens of our hard-fought rights. They're trying to throw back the clock on everything. We know a lot about it. Anyway, the bill, the Protecting the Republicans from Fair Elections Act is moving to the Senate. They're supposed to. John Thune, the majority leader of the Senate, has promised to vote for lawmakers returning on February 24th. So 50 Republicans, including Susan Collins, by the way, of Maine, get her out. Vote against her, please. It faces a filibuster. 60 votes are needed to overcome it. And Democrats, led by Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, whatever you think of him, I'm not a huge fan, but in this case I agree with him. He's strongly opposing the bill, calling it Jim Crow 2.0, and I think that's apt. And a threat to voter access. It's terrible. So call, write, keep writing, keep letting your voices be heard, please, please, please. All of us together are winning this fight. The bill could disenfranchise millions, particularly women, who have changed their names after marriage, transgender individuals, low-income voters, and those without easy access, same group, low-income voters, to birth certificates or passports. Even, people like me have some challenges getting access after COVID to updating all of my records, including getting a replacement birth certificate. Not that easily done these days. Fortunately, I have a previous copy, but not everybody does, I think it's important to kind of give a shout out to our old author friend George Orwell, who wrote in his 1949 dystopian novel, 1984, about Newspeak, his fictional language of Oceania, which was a totalitarian superstate, to meet the ideological requirements of INGSOC, which was short for English Socialism. Man, that sounds kind of enlightened compared to what we have going on here now. The party created Newspeak, a controlled language of simplified grammar and restricted vocabulary, designed to prevent people from being able to think critically. Any thoughts on that? Don't you see some parallels between the ways in which a lot of the disinformation political class is helping us to kind of dumb down our capacity to really create some communicate and articulate abstract concepts, such as personal identity and self-expression, like in 1984, the novel, and free will, which in the 1984 novel were thought crimes. Acts of personal independence that contradict the ideological orthodoxy of INGSOC collectivism. So it's just like now, if you want to get out in the streets and protest, you're likely to be shoved to the ground, pepper sprayed, pepper shot, perhaps executed for expressing your freedom of speech, freedom of assembly rights that are guaranteed to us by our Constitution. Here's a little bit of a short list of people, recent casualties in the war for democracy that our government is waging against the people of the United States. Most recently, Alex Preddy, who was shot and killed by ICE agents in Minneapolis on January the 24th, 2026. Officials initially labeled him a domestic terrorist, but video evidence contradicted the narrative. Oh my God, does it? And all the testimony of his friends and family and co-workers. He was a VA nurse. He happened to be a licensed gun owner. And when they found his gun, they said, "Gun, gun!" And that's when they opened fire on him as he was already pinned on the ground. His gun was in its holster. One agent quickly removed it, and then they started shooting him right there. Amazing. Horrible. Extremely sad. Then Renee Good, Alex Preddy was 37. Renee Good also 37. Because that's an age range that they really, are after. Was fatally shot by an ICE agent in Minneapolis on January the 7th. So 3 weeks prior to Alex Preddy's execution. I call it an execution. I don't know what you folks think. It hasn't been adjudicated in an actual court, but I mean, it's hard to argue that it was otherwise. DHS claimed she attempted to run over officers, but state officials disputed this. Well, yeah, and so does every person in the world who's seen the video of Renee Good's execution. There was Keith Porter, who was a black U.S. citizen and father, who was shot and killed by an off-duty ICE agent in Los Angeles on New Year's Eve 2025. Authorities claimed he raised a rifle. His family disputes this. I don't know as much about that case, so I'm not going to comment on my feelings and thoughts about it, but I do have to say that my bias is inclined to lean towards what the family is saying. Their credibility, even though I don't have any idea who Keith Porter is, nor have I met any of his family members, just by the fact that they're not Homeland Security, they're much more likely to be credible, in my opinion. Homeland Security has lied. And seemingly that's all they know. How to communicate is through lies. There was Isaiah Sanchez Barboza. Oh, he was only 31. A Mexican citizen was killed by a Border Patrol agent in Rio Grande City, Texas in December 2025 during a detention attempt. So I guess now if they have too much of a hard time arresting you, it's a lot easier just to kill the person, and that way they stop resisting. So much for due process, freedom, liberty, rights. Then there was Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, a father and cook from Mexico, was shot and killed by Border Patrol in Franklin Park, a suburb of Chicago, on September 12, 2025. Just, what's that, about 5 months ago? Federal claims of officer injury were contradicted by body cam footage. He had no criminal record and had lived peacefully in Chicago for nearly 2 decades. And that's one of the videos I did also watch, and he was actually backing his car up away from the agent who shot him point blank and murdered him in his car. Law enforcement officials around the country are banned by their agencies from firing at a moving vehicle, period, the end. No matter if you happen to know this person is an actual murderer and a threat. Still not supposed to shoot at a moving vehicle. It's insane. So moving on from there, Glenn Kirshner says the government has pre-cleared the murderer of Renee Nicole Good. Her executioner is Jonathan Ross. Jonathan Ross is a 43-year-old U.S. immigrant and customs enforcement officer who gained national disdain after his homicide of Renee Nicole Good, a peaceful, kind, and peace-loving 37-year-old mother of 3, again in Minneapolis on January the 7th, 2026, just last month. 2 Customs and Border Protection agents identified in government records as the individual who fired on, again I'm arguing, executed Alex Preddy on January 24th in Minneapolis, ironically named Jesus Ochoa and Raimundo Gutierrez. From my perspective, very ironic that they used 2, what a lot of us think of as Gestapo-like agents with Spanish surnames to kill an American citizen in this case. Yeah, mostly they were just attacking people that look like they might have ever been near Mexico at some point in their history based on their appearance. And Sidney Conlager Dove, who's a U.S. representative from California, said Noem needs to be impeached. You'll hear that being echoed a lot. Kristi Noem, and head of Homeland Security, also nicknamed Puppy Killer. Look up her history if you don't know about that. The reality is that the executive branch of the U.S. government is waging war on U.S. citizens and on our democracy. To be clear, they are backed and aided by the world's richest and most powerful oligarchs and technocrats in human history. So, Americans, we the people, as stated in the preamble of our Constitution, are the only answer to this illegal authoritarian attack. Fortunately, we, the people, are too numerous, determined, and powerful to be defeated. Together, we will prevail. This is what I believe. We are united in solidarity and indefatigable. That means we're tireless. How is this war being waged against us? Here's a brief list. 1. By pardoning over 1,500 convicted felons and then hiring some of them to work for the government. By selling access, citizenship, pardons of all kinds, and all kinds of favors to foreign and domestic supplicants in blatant, in-your-face violation of the Emoluments Clause of our Constitution. It's not allowed for a president to do any of these things. He is operating in direct defiance of the law, in your face. Hey, stop me, is his kind of message to us. Well, we are going to do that. Trust me, Mr. Trump, you will be stopped. So, those eager to pay bribes to the orange tin pot dictator are gaining wealth and power at our expense. No good. They are all domestic and foreign actors. No lack of privilege here in terms of, well, Saudi Arabia. Come on down, buy some privilege here. You know, you want to come in from South America and do some mining in Minnesota. Extract some copper sulfides at the head of the headwaters in Minnesota. Yeah, come on in. According to our federal government, easy access. Fortunately, Minnesotans are fighting hard against that incursion into their state, as well as the murdering of their citizens and harassment and destruction of personal and private property by these mad thugs. It's amazing just to be here in this moment. Another thing, the way this war is being waged by murdering unknown, uncharged, and unindicted over 100 or more boaters in the Caribbean Sea. Trump is trying to inoculate us to be numb to barbarous, illegal murder. Due process be damned. Due process is really an important element of our Constitution as well. I encourage everybody to read. No public evidence of wrongdoing is surfaced or been provided against these victims. These heinous exercises are clearly designed also to inoculate the military to follow unlawful orders as well. It seems obvious to me that that's a lot of their purpose. If one can imagine that there's a purpose to anything that's going on here, and I think it's all just about obtaining, consolidating, and keeping power at any cost. It's obvious that none of those boats in the Caribbean Sea had the capacity, capability, or even intention of coming anywhere near the United States of America, as has been that lie has been perpetrated by our president and all of his underlings. You know, the Vice President, Secretary of State, Homeland Security, blah blah blah. All of these people are saying, and you know, a lot of congressional members, that, oh boy, these people were. Tom Cotton in the great state of Arkansas, came out of the security hearings where they were allowed to see what they called the double tap, which is actually an extra strike on the boaters whose boat had already been completely blown to smithereens, and there happened to be two unfortunate survivors. Normally they would be fortunate because the Coast Guard would go out and rescue those guys immediately from drowning. No matter what their potential crime or actual known charged crime was, even if they had fired on the U.S. Navy, which they did not. They didn't even know they were being targeted for murder. Anyway, here's Tom Cotton. He comes out of the hearing and he says, oh man, those guys were about ready to turn a piece of the wrecked boat back over and then continue their criminal escapades. I mean, if you believe that, folks, you just believe anything at all. I mean, I can tell you that really seriously, elephants do fly, and you know, they fly really quickly, and they can turn into hummingbirds over the weekend. I mean, I get you to believe anything. If you believe what Tom Cotton said about those stranded guys out in the middle of the ocean, floating on a piece of wreckage, being a threat to anyone in any context, in any real world scenario, just, folks, come on, this cannot be. This cannot be what we're being led by. So shame on you, Mr. Cotton. You should really apologize to everyone in your life, your friends, family, your children, certainly to the American people, for lying about the threat that those two helpless survivors, what they offered to threaten the United States of America. Not happening. Another way that this war is being waged, by the illegal and unauthorized attack on Venezuela and abduction of its illegitimate leader. I will grant that was the case. He stole his election. Nicolas Maduro stole his own election in Venezuela. There's very strong, clear evidence to support that his opposition legitimately won the majority of votes in that country to make his opposition the leader. But Maduro did a lot of the same tactics that Trump would like to have done here and attempted to do here in regard to the 2020 election, and still hasn't stopped trying to do. But of course Trump hates him because Maduro succeeded at staying in office after losing an election where Trump failed to stay in office after losing an election, which, you know, thank God that did happen here in the United States. Sadly, he's back in office again, folks. Whoa. Most of his critical thinking capacity, you know, American people still have the capacity to have critical thinking. You can see how absurd and preposterous it is that Trump was reelected to anything, or even was empowered by the Supreme Court to have an option to run, because his election was unconstitutional. He's not even an eligible candidate under the 14th Amendment. He should be barred from being able to run for any elected office ever again. Anyway, also how we're being this way war is being waged against us is using American citizens and American cities to train the National Guard, ICE, and CBP goons, which I consider as hired mercenaries for the federal government on how to attack and intimidate people. They're trained, they're deployed and sicked on the American people. Another way is by threatening and intimidating our best international allies and trading partners, like Canada and Mexico are number one, number two trading partners in the world. Not to mention the European Union and NATO, etc., etc. Another way that they're waging war against America is by trying to crush dissent. That's dissent, that's free speech, people saying, no kings, no kings, no kings, impeach, convict, remove, impeach, convict, remove. That's what we call dissent. They're trying to crush dissent by trying to break and undermine the justice system and using the Department of Justice to attack Trump's perceived enemies. So they're also doing it by attacking the press and arresting journalists like Don Lemon, for example, and the other people that were in that church the other day reporting on the disruption of a Christian church meeting, which was being orchestrated over by the pastor there, who happened to be an ICE agent. Can't imagine why they were in there in the first place, can you? I don't know. By intimidating and shaking down law firms, that's another tactic that the federal government is using against the United States of America, our laws, our Constitution, and its people, by shaking down and intimidating the media and law firms. They've been very successful. Look at ABC, CBS, CNN. Look at the big law firms that have capitulated and said, gee, we'll give you some free legal service. Okay, Mr. President, just don't be mean to us, please. Those who have stood up to him, their reputations are enhanced. They're getting stronger. They're getting more followers. They're getting more contracts. The capitulators, they're not gonna make out too well. Another possibility, the last thing I'm going to mention here, is by brutalizing and executing American citizens. Renee Nicole Good, Alex Preddy, in broad daylight in front of numerous witnesses recording the murders. And it goes on and on. There's a lot more. But that's enough for us to rally behind, to center on, to get together on. We, and what I mean by that is American people. I'm 74. When I say always, all of my life and long before I was born, people have hoped, and by design we ought to be able to depend on our federal representatives in the Congress, the Executive Cabinet, members of the U.S. Judiciary from the Supreme Court on down, and all the members of the bar and the media, the journalists, members of law enforcement and the military, to stand strong and unified in solidarity with great determination and clarity, as we the people are now doing, to unseat this usurper, this fraudster, Donald John Trump. His crimes are established by overwhelming evidence and convictions and his own admission. He's a treasonous, law-breaking, convicted, criminal, con man, tax dodge, sex offender, and sellout of our great country, of our faith, of our Constitution, and our laws. He has no place in the presidency. He must be held accountable for all the incredible damage he has caused our citizens, our country, the rule of law, and our international reputation, and once valuable relationships around the world, just to name a few things. Instead, what we witness, I'm very sad about this, is the abdication of all our faith and hope, with the shirking of the responsibility to the American people by the above-named so-called representatives of we the people. They have they have in too many cases failed and refused to protect our interests. Fortunately, it's not unanimous. There are a lot of legislators still who are speaking truth to power. They are standing up. They are bringing cases. They're advocating for the release of the Jeffrey Epstein papers. And as unbelievably horrible and heinous and ridiculous and cowardly and cruel as the terrible rapes of children, perhaps murders and tortures of children as well, that Jeffrey Epstein is responsible for. He is also an international criminal on other levels: espionage, money laundering, and all kinds of intrigue that haven't even been touched yet by this conversation. But, just focusing on the, well, I guess we're getting a little bit of it now, right? They arrested former Prince Andrew today in England, kept him in custody for 11 hours. And I read it in the news media that it's common for in the English justice system for people to be questioned but released under investigation before they are formally charged with their crimes. I'm not sure what the logic is there completely. Maybe some of you international legal experts are more hip to that, so interested to hear from you on that. I may do a little research myself when I have time about what's going on in England. But isn't it refreshing that the King of England said, I support the rule of law and the authorities here, and I'm going to, support them in the arrest of my brother to bring him to justice in this matter. That'd be refreshing to see that in our country. It used to be kind of normal to think that the President of the United States had a lot of norms and areas and agreements that he just wouldn't go out of those bounds. If it was clearly a violation of the Constitution, most presidents have tried to stay within the guidelines there most of the time. It hasn't certainly been a perfect history in that regard, but man, nothing like we have right now. Okay. So my message to those cowards, those sycophants who have betrayed us, and that is all the people in the cabinet supporting Trump, all the people in the Congress, all the people on the Supreme Court, all the people in law enforcement, all the people in the Department of Homeland Security, and on down, the Secretary of State, all of these people are the Secretary of Defense. What a disgrace and embarrassment that is. I want to tell these folks, I believe that you are now judged as cowards and forever will be. Remember this. When the pumpkin tin pot dictator dies or is deprived of office by Article 25 or forced out by brute force of the people or is impeached, you will lose your immunity forever. So if you're hoping to get that, little commuted sentence or pardon from the great orange god, you may not be as lucky as you're hoping. You might want to change your mind about your positions on some things, like right now, yesterday. Anyway, I want to remind people in this moment, in February of 2026, as in 1954, when Joseph N. Welch, the U.S. Army's chief counsel, famously said to Senator Joe McCarthy, "Have you no sense of decency, sir, at long last?" And that was during the Army-McCarthy hearings on June 9th, 1954. That statement was made by Joseph N. Welch. And that nationally televised moment significantly damaged McCarthy's credibility and contributed to his eventual censure by the Senate. Ah, the good old days. Censure by the Senate. Man, I say this now to Trump and his acolytes. Have you no sense of decency, sir, at long last, or ever? If you're not familiar with Joe McCarthy, his was he was on a national witch hunt to shake out all the Reds, the communists in the United States, and was focused on government and military employees. His committee was called the House on Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, which led to high-profile investigations into alleged communist ties among actors, writers, and directors, resulting in the Hollywood blacklist that denied work to over 300 individuals. Though McCarthy himself was more directly involved with government investigations, his rhetoric amplified those efforts and created a climate of fear across the film industry. And just like today, that would-be authoritarian Joe McCarthy needed his vulnerable other group to vilify. In his case, it was the commies. Today, as it was in fascist Italy, Nazi Germany, today it is the immigrant. All right. So to the Nazis, it was the Jew. I guess you could assume that they all had similar valences as an immigrant. Maybe they were recent immigrants to Germany. But anyway, they were the other. So in conjunction with that history, I wanted to mention that you may not know that Roy Cohn, full name Roy Marcus Cohn, was born on February 20th, 1927 and died August 2, 1986 from AIDS-related complications. Pretty well known, homosexual. A lot of my great friends, personal friends, are homosexuals. I have nothing against homosexuals at all, but he pretended not to be one. So he was pretty harsh guy anyway, and which had nothing to do with his sexual orientation, but I think it's just ironic in terms of the righteous right who has developed and invented all these culture wars for us to fight each other over. That one of Donald Trump's major proponents and advocates and mentors and advisors in his lifetime died of AIDS. All right. Anyway, so Cohn had been investigating McCarthy's, assisting McCarthy's investigations of suspected communists, and he had built up his reputation by prosecuting Julius and Ethel Rosenberg and helping them become, maybe the only two people, at least in modern history, who were executed for treason in the United States. Maybe some of us can think of some other candidates now. I digress. I will move on from that. Anyway, his reputation, this is Roy Cohn, deteriorated during the 50s and late 70s as he settled into New York City and became a private lawyer for many clients, including real estate magnates, political operatives, Catholic clergy, and organized crime, including mafia figures Tony Salerno, Carmine Galante, John Gotti, and Mario Gigante. In the 70s and during the 80s, he became a prominent legal and political fixer in New York City. He also represented and mentored Donald Trump during Trump's early business career. While representing Trump, Cohn also represented mobster Anthony Salerno, who along with other mobsters controlled the concrete unions in New York City. Cohn is alleged to have introduced Salerno to Trump, which later led to Salerno's aiding Trump in the construction of Trump Tower by providing concrete. Here it says at reduced prices. We also happen to know that it was during a union strike period. No one else in the city was getting any concrete except for our beloved orange tin pot. Interesting. Never admitting default was a core principle that Cohn instilled in Trump. Cohn viewed contrition as weakness, and he taught Trump to deny everything, admit nothing, and never apologize. This approach became a defining trait of Trump's public persona. Anybody recognize those traits? I think they're pretty obvious at this point. Anyway, yep. It became a defining trait of public's persona, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Never admit you lost or anything. Counterattacking with greater force was another key lesson. Cohn believed in hitting back harder than the initial attack, a tactic summarized as attack, 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 and punch back 10 times harder. Trump adopted this strategy throughout his career. One could argue throughout his presidency as well, using lawsuits, public statements, and media appearances to aggressively target critics and opponents. The corruption and weaponization of the Justice Department. Who has mastered that and done that as effectively and completely and absolutely at any point in our history? Who has done that any more completely than the current President of the United States? I say with great shame. These tactics were prominently highlighted in the film The Apprentice, where Cohn is shown teaching Trump his 3 rules. Attack, attack, attack. Admit nothing, deny everything. Always claim victory, and never admit defeat. A playbook Trump has consistently followed. Let's not forget the most notable fascist rally at Madison Square Garden occurred on February 20th, 1939, when the German-American Bund, a pro-Nazi organization, held a rally attended by approximately 20 to 22,000 people. Now, I know this is a little bit of a shift from the previous conversation about Roy Cohn and his mentorship of Donald Trump, but it's not completely disconnected in my mind at all. The pro-Nazi organization held a rally attended by approximately 20 to 22,000 people. This event, officially called a pro-American rally, or mass demonstration for true Americanization, featured Nazi salutes, swastikas alongside American flags, and anti-Semitic rhetoric, all under a giant portrait of George Washington flanked by swastikas. So going back to the topic of vilification of immigrants, let's look at current advertising practices by the Department of Homeland Security, which we all fondly know of as DHS. So it's clear Homeland Security has used several phrases and slogans in its recruitment materials that have been linked to Nazi or white supremacist rhetoric, drawing widespread criticism from experts and watchdog groups, and a lot of Americans like me. One of their ads reads, "One homeland, one people, one heritage." The slogan used by the Department of Labor on social media, that's the Department of Labor of the United States of America, closely mirrors the Nazi-era phrase "Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer." One people, one empire, one leader. So what our phrase is, one homeland, one people, one heritage. Can you get the connection there? The link, one heritage, right? It's not Native American, it's not African American, it's not Hispanic American, it's not Asian American, it's not Irish American for that matter, or Italian American, or German American even. It's one heritage, one people, one homeland, one people, one heritage. Yeah, I think they're saying that if you're just a little darkly complected, you probably don't fit. Anyway, America for Americans, another phrase. This phrase used at DHS and ICE recruitment posts. Historical ties to xenophobic rhetoric. It was used by the Ku Klux Klan and echoes the Nazi slogan, Germany is for Germans, America is for Americans, promoting exclusionary nationalism. Another ad. We will have our home again. We. Used in a DHS social media post promoting ICE jobs, this phrase is linked to the white nationalist song, By God We Will Reclaim Our Home, which is popular in neo-Nazi circles. The song promotes ethno-nationalist nostalgia and the idea of racial replacement. And maybe a lot of you don't know anything about what the heck I'm talking about, but I think you can remember a lot of people on Fox News talking about the white replacement theory. Yeah, it's remarkable. You know, I guess if a white person has sex with a person who looks different than them, they are participating in white replacement. So this is just kind of just a crazy fear thing that a lot of obviously very skittish and white fearful people are promoting. Another thing that they're using in their advertising to get people to work for the government, go out and stomp some American citizens or some immigrant-looking folks. The slogan is, which way, American man? This ICE recruitment tagline echoes to the book, Which Way, Western Man? A white supremacist, William Gailey Simpson, a foundational text in far-right extremist ideology. So they say in his writings, which way, Western man? Which way, American man? So these folks will get the references. Symbolic use of H and 14 words. In some posts, the words heritage and homeland had their H capitalized, which experts say references 88 or HH, which refers to, in white supremacist code, Heil Hitler, HH. Additionally, a post with exactly 14 words was seen as a nod to the 14 words white supremacist slogan, which reads, we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. So, I'm thinking we can secure the future for all children, white, black, brown, yellow, red, orange, green, purple, whatever. Any children that are humans, that we honor and respect in our country, which we always have done. When I say we, I say we, the people that are not afraid of who we are. I'm grateful and happy to be a privileged, white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed American male, middle-aged American male. Oh boy, I'm in pretty good shape here, folks. I get all kinds of privileges. Nice. But I don't think they're earned or deserved in any particular way, any other than my neighbors. I have some gay neighbors, I got black and white neighbors, I got people all around me they have different religious beliefs, they eat different food. And I can learn a lot from them, and they learn a lot from me. We share information together, we can share meals. We're not threatening. We're not threatened by each other. I'm not afraid of people who look different than I do. There's no reason for me to be. I just want to mention that for those of you who may have accepted vilifying immigrants, you may be interested in the following information, accurate information. And this is garnered from these really far left, not. The Cato Institute, folks, founded by the Koch brothers. You can't find some more libertarian right-wing type of people. They're promoting, you know, the white way of America and all this stuff. So these people are quoting, I'm quoting statistics from them and others like them. Incarceration rates among immigrants, they are 60% less likely to be incarcerated than US-born citizens. A trend observed since at least 1870. 1870. That's a long time ago, folks. Not too long, 5 years after the end of the Civil War between the North and South, between slaveholders and non-slaveholders. Incarceration rates amongst immigrants, 60% less likely to be incarcerated. And let's keep this in context too of knowing that they're much more likely to be stopped and questioned and harassed by law enforcement all over the place. Okay, and according to the super conservative 1923 Cato Institute analysis, native-born Americans found that crime rates, native-born Americans, 1,221 per 100,000 crimes. Among illegal, quote, people without proper documentation, 613 out of 100,000. Half of native-born Americans. Legal immigrants, people with documentation and papers, 319 per 100,000. Just over 25% of the rate of native-born Americans. Cato Institute analysis. Arrest rates in Texas, folks. Texas. Not considered necessarily a big blue state, folks, with, you know, liberal and progressive ideas. What they're saying is that arrest rates, the only state, Texas, that is tracking immigration status in criminal records, shows undocumented immigrants were less than half as likely as US-born citizens to be arrested for violent and drug crimes, supporting the statistics I read to you about 60% less likely to be incarcerated from the above. Okay? So less than half as likely as US-born citizens to be arrested for violent and drug crimes. And believe me, they're probably a lot more likely to be asked about these things. Did you just commit a violent or drug crime? Nobody ever asked me that, but I'm thinking a lot of brown and black people walking around, and folks that maybe were born in Mexico even, or South America, a lot more likely to be asked those questions or investigated for those types of crimes than I would be, and they're still less than half as likely to be arrested. For property crimes, undocumented immigrants were arrested at 1/4 the rate of US-born citizens. Property crimes. Undocumented immigrants. So I guess that would also qualify you, if you're undocumented, to be what, you know, the extremists call illegal. Then what they're saying here is still in Texas, legal immigrants had lower arrest rates than US-born citizens across all categories, though higher than undocumented immigrants. Okay, so undocumented immigrants had a little bit higher arrest rate than documented immigrants, so-called legal. So I may have misspoke when I introduced that. So I'm talking about legal immigrants had lower arrest rates. Crime type comparison relative to US-born citizens. Undocumented immigrants are over 2 times more likely to be arrested for violent crimes, but still at lower absolute rates. So let me get this again. Okay, relative to US-born citizens, undocumented immigrants over 2 times more likely to be arrested for violent crimes, but still at lower absolute rates. So let me think about that. They're 2.5 times more likely for drug crimes and 4 times more likely for property crimes to be arrested. That seems contradictory, doesn't it, to this other information? National and state level trends. Research consistently shows that immigration does not increase crime rates. Research consistently shows that immigration does not increase crime rates. In fact, cities and states with higher immigrant populations often see declining homicide, declining property crime rates, especially when inclusive policies are in place. That is very interesting. Federal versus local data. Well, local arrest data, for example, in New York's ICE detainer report, may highlight individual cases. Oh, I gotcha. Federal conviction data shows that the vast majority of non-citizen convictions are for immigration violations, not violent or property crimes. In summary, immigrants, regardless of legal status, are significantly less likely to commit crimes than native-born Americans, and their presence is associated with lower overall crime rates in communities. So folks, if you want your community to be safe, your neighborhood, invite some recent immigrants to buy a house next door. You'll be safer and better off. Isn't that interesting? They are murdering Americans without justification. No, okay, so now this is something going, scratch that, has nothing to do with immigrants. So this is what's happening that our government is doing, that I want to mention. Okay, so immigrants are great. Bring them in. We love them. Seriously. But the government is murdering Americans without justification and saying that they are justified and have immunity. And that the murderers have immunity. They don't even know the circumstances. They just know, oh yeah, we told our guys to go out and kill some people, so yeah, of course they have immunity. We the people have not granted immunity to Trump, his henchmen, or anyone who attacks us. We will fight peacefully until that fails. Well, and then we'll keep going peacefully until it fails again. I say impeach, convict, remove. And over again, impeach, convict, remove. Call your senators, call your congresspeople, call your neighbors, impeach, convict, remove. Call your friends, call your cousins, call your drinking buddies. Impeach, convict, remove. Or if you don't drink, call your teetotalers, call your anybody, squash partner, anybody. And tell them, impeach, convict, remove. We the people must get this monstrous criminal the hell out of our White House as soon as possible. Stop the American carnage. Trump said, he stated on Truth Social on January the 15th, that the corrupt politicians of Minnesota, I guess it takes one to know one, but I'm thinking, yeah, they don't hold a candle to Trump's corruption. If the corrupt politicians of Minnesota don't obey the law and stop the professional agitators, I always thought a professional is somebody that got paid. Oh, that's what he's implying. The people protesting in the streets are being paid. Let's see the pay stubs. Come on. Okay, so if the corrupt politicians of Minnesota don't obey the law and stop the professional agitators and insurrectionists from attacking the patriots of ICE, who are only trying to do their job. Yeah, I think they are trying to do their job, but he's pretending that their job is something other than what it really is. I, meaning Trump, will institute the Insurrection Act, which many presidents have done before me. Let's count them. I don't think too many. And quickly put an end to the travesty that is taking place in that once great state. I argue Minnesota is a great state. I love their policies there. They're feeding children. They're taking care of their healthcare system. They're really trying to do something about the affordability crisis. which President Trump claims to have solved. It's hard for me to say that out loud, but I'm already gasping, as you can see. Anyway, the federal government is waging war on American citizens, the rule of law, the Constitution, civility, compassion, and decency. Those are all under attack. The executive branch of the United States government hired, directed, trained, and deployed mercenaries who are taunting, physically attacking, brutally pepper spraying, and publicly executing peaceful, law-abiding, and innocent American citizens, and peaceful, law-abiding immigrants as well. And that same government is immediately lying about the executions and blaming the victims for their own murder. You can't get any more Orwellian than that, I don't think. Comparing this autocratic regime to Nazis is perfectly correct, especially when they are using the exact language, techniques, and lies, not to mention the fashion adapted by the apparatchiks, triggermen of the regime. Check out the attire of Greg Buvino and the side-by-side of Hermann Goering and Heinrich Himmler, Adolf Hitler's top government people in the Third Reich. I think it's a fair comparison. You know, I mean, the jacket, he could have borrowed it from one of those dead guys. Anyway, don't forget old Stephen Miller, considered one of the most influential figures in the Trump administration and of the Trumpism movement. His politics have been described as far-right, anti-immigration, and white nationalist. In these times when the president's men, supplicants, sycophants, ass-kissers, and brown-nosers, or whatever you prefer to describe them, to use George Orwell's aptly named Newspeak to say, war is peace and peace is war, and that peaceful, vociferous protesters are out there, you know, protesting against the crimes committed against them, that those people are illegal? I don't think so. I don't think they are. After the execution of Renee Nicole Good on January 7th, Trump said he called it self-defense and asserted Good, meaning Renee, tried to run over the officer. Said he doesn't want anyone shot, but also doesn't want people trying to run over policemen. So if you do try to run over a policeman, you're fair game to be shot. Obviously, Renee Nicole Good was trying to slowly move her vehicle in conjunction with the commands that were being shouted at her. And it was going real slow. Maybe a turtle underneath her tire possibly could have been crushed without being able to get out of the way, but yeah, I didn't see Jonathan Ross being in that same position. So it's horrible to watch this terrible scene while continuing to blame good conduct, to blame Good's conduct in this execution. And then also Trump said that after the execution of Alex Preddy on January the 24th, he posted that this is the gunman's gun, loaded. Later shifted tone somewhat, said the administration was reviewing everything, and you know, at some point we will leave. They've done a phenomenal job after they murdered Alex and Renee. Yeah, phenomenal. Vice President J.D. Vance said after Renee Nicole Good, he said the officer's life was in danger and he fired in self-defense, also calling the death a tragedy and urging prayer. Yeah. We just want to shoot some folks. We'll pray for them after you die. Good. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And then Vance also said after Alex Preddy was murdered, He shared Stephen Miller's post characterizing Preddy as an assassin, would-be assassin, who tried to murder federal agents. No evidence of that at all, not a shred. And he separately posted, Mr. Vance did, blaming Minnesota local leadership and describing the unrest as engineered chaos. Tied to far-left agitators with local authorities. Engineered chaos, I would suggest that that is true, but it's on the part of Department of Homeland Security sponsoring ICE and CBP to come in and attack the citizens of Minneapolis and other cities in Minnesota. And our great Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, and I say that in quotes with facetiously and sarcastically, that after Renee Nicole Good was killed, she described the incident as domestic terrorism, alleging that an anti-ICE rioter weaponized her vehicle, per ABC's write-up of her remarks. Wow. Renee Nicole Good, just totally lovely person. An exemplary American. If I could be more like her, that would be my goal. Not a terrorist. Not a terrorist. Not weaponizing her vehicle. No. Noem went on to say after Alex Preddy's murder, she said that Alex Preddy intended to kill and inflict maximum damage. Well, I saw him trying to protect the woman who'd been shoved brutally to the ground by the CBP agents. And then when they shoved him and pinned him to the ground and then shot him up, he wasn't in a position to be a threat to anybody, especially since they were the ones that removed his gun from his holster. Unbelievable. Greg Bovino said after Alex Preddy claimed that Preddy planned to massacre federal agents. Mm-hmm. Man, that is so horrible. And then after Renee Nicole Good, Bovino had said, look at the video. It wasn't an assassination. The officers had milliseconds to make a decision to save his life and his other fellow agents. Milliseconds. What the government is doing is no accident. People in the media all say the ICE and CBP agents are poorly trained. A lot of people in the media say that. I say, sure, if you're comparing them to nearly any police agency of any type in America, that appears to be a correct assessment in one way. In the context of an authoritarian regime determined to subdue, terrorize, intimidate, and control the population, they're perfectly trained to strike fear and terror, inflict pain, and execute Americans who are exercising their constitutional First and Second Amendment rights. So, anyway, I know there's a lot of darkness in there, contained in there, and it's clear that that darkness is being promulgated, perpetrated, advocated, bought and sold for by the titans of industry and the technocrats of the world, pulling the strings of our executive branch, and it's insane. But I want to ask you to do this. Please subscribe and share your comments and share this video widely. And as my old friend Scoop Nisker often said, if you don't like the news, go out and make some of your own. Protest, call and write your representatives. Let people know how you feel about the state of our country. Make change with others. Support good candidates. Join indivisible groups, the Women's March, 50501, or other freedom and liberty advocates. Boycott, disrupt your complicit employer or vendor. Get in some good trouble. Let others' courage inspire you. We are in this together. You have nationwide support and community support. Look around in your neighborhood. You'll find people who see things the way you do, and that they're willing to engage and take some risks and get involved and donate, promote, and so forth. Good causes. Keep strong, and to all of you in the audience, stay strong, stay encouraged, keep in touch, subscribe, promote, share. Peace and love. This is Mark London signing off. Thanks for being here.